Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back once again to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists, they did. They absolutely got it correct. And this is Tom Navolis, your host, coming to you again from a uh, undisclosed location in Northeast Ohio. Well, no. If you've been watching the other programs, you know exactly where I am, and I am delighted to be here and be with you as well. This week, we're going to do a little bit of a follow-up on a couple of different things. First off, I want to take and paraphrase a email that a friend sent to me. Actually, it was George that was on the last program, George Brennan, in reference to something that he received from an executive consultant in the oil and gas industry. And I'm going to paraphrase it because I haven't had the opportunity to talk to George totally about this. But in the context of what we're talking on, all of the global warming insanities and all of that out there, just real quick for you to understand is from the senior executive. His position is with all the ESG nonsense, with all of the DEI nonsense, with all of the global warming nonsense, this 2030, 2035, and going to, was it net carbon zero type of activity will be absolutely disastrous because renewables, as we've discussed before, just can't handle it. But what people don't consider, to the point that what we brought out in that program when George and I were talking about is that heating, electricity are going to be extremely impacted by the lesser natural gas. Now, with that, what people do not realize, and this is what was in this email, is that many forms of fertilizer are also derived from natural gas and sometimes even oil because it's all carbon based, and so it's kind of necessary in certain fertilizers that are out there. And what this individual informed George and then George myself, is that the potentials of eliminating those sources of fertilizer manufacturing will affect 3 billion people across the globe. 3 billion. It would affect 2/3, if not more, slash all of the population in the United States. In fact, what this person indicates is that it would destroy anything to do with farming, therefore food supply, both animal as well as crop. And to that point, you would see in that 3 billion people that effect is mass starvation. So just put that one into your back pocket, especially since the Chinese are coming out with, and it's in your notes at samueladamsreturns.net, that the Chinese are coming out with AI to replace human beings. They have a number of already active working robots, and by 2027, they indicated that they should have sufficient robots, AI robots, that can replace basically your middle class workers, banking, insurance, a lot of those other entities. I'm just wondering in that, will they be able to replace the bureaucrats? Do they have any intention? Or will the bureaucrats become the special class? Anyway, just some fun stuff to bring to you before we get into now what does it mean from building strategies and understanding taking the hill? I mentioned last week that that's what I wanted to bring to you is some concepts, some strategies, some basics of get your hands dirty. What's it going to take? I left off in the newsletter about our time, our money, our energy, everything that it takes, no different than what the founders engaged in to take and establish this nation. Once again, people argue, well, Tom, that was only 1/3 of the population that was engaged in that, and the other third, they were loyalists, and the other third was actually making money on both sides of the case, and would just kind of sit there and wait to see what shook out. Very much could be the same, except the big difference now is that there are more than a third that have been destroyed by the educational system, number one, and that are giving into a desire to fill a hole. There used to be an organization way back in the 70s that were somewhat influential in taking and introducing me to a real necessity to take and make a personal commitment to Christ in my life. Not a religious thing, but a personal relationship type of commitment. That organization was called Campus Crusade for Christ. Now they're called something else, and they're woke, which I don't know how they lead people to Christ, and whatever they're doing in leading people to Christ is leading them into a pit, which we're going to talk about because that's actually an identified organization in one of the resources at SamuelAdamsReturns.net that I really think is most critical to watch. And point B, that if you blow out of here right now and don't come back to the program, which I hope you would, and go listen to those two YouTube presentations that I have linked in there, I think that you will get foundational truths for strategy. So let me start with this. Let me get over here to some of my notes. And it comes down to this, that taking the hill is the spirit and local. And what I mean by the spirit, I'm not talking about what we get on the rah, rah, rah type of spirit. No, you'll see here in a few moments that I'm talking about the deeper spirit, your spiritual. But even if you don't even look at that, what I want you to consider is the cost. What is the cost of taking the hill? Well, I inferred that to you in that it takes your time, it takes your money, it takes every resource that you have to be committed to taking the hill. I have there at the website in this blog post for today's program linked to some numerous examples, historical examples, and also what it is and some of the history of the Breeds Hill / Bunker Hill situation that happened at the beginning of this nation, whereas we were defending the hill and the British were taking the hill, and they charged actually Breeds Hill 3 times because that's what was actually fortified. And in those 3 times, they lost virtually 2-to-1 of the Americans in wounded and killed. They paid a heavy price to take the hill, and yet the Americans were able to escape. Now, what I want you to look at is that in taking the hill, the cost to do so was a failure and did not happen in respect to Ohio's constitutional issue 1. I talked about that in other programs. Go check them out. Go find them. I don't even put links to them. Do some of your own homework. But the enemy did a greater effort in taking the hill. They put their money, they put their resources in it. And to be true, what I saw, and I'm seeing now even more as you go back and you look on social media, is that otherwise Christian conservatives on the social media realm, if you will, were thinking and supporting issue one. They thought they were saving the Ohio Constitution. Well, these folks have no clue about the Ohio Constitution, no clue about the history of the Ohio Constitution, no clue about the perversions that happened beginning in 1910, 1911 with the Constitutional Convention that began the progressive changes of the Ohio Constitution. The other thing that I want to bring to you here is that the pundits don't lead in taking the hill. Everybody quotes the pundits. You have the Victor Davis Hansons, you have the Joe Rogans, you got the Petersons and all of their like. You have all of these out there, and there's virtually none of them. They all have great things to say. Historical context in the case of Hanson and great information. But this class of folks don't have the ability to engage where the boulders are rolling down and bouncing to the bottom of the hill where everyone that needs to fight is standing. They're not really worth any type of leadership that I can tell. They can say a lot of good stuff. And you know what? I'm not talking from, don't get it wrong, I'm not talking from any envy or jealousy. I'm just talking of fact as I went back and I researched what's going on with these folks. They have no leadership. They're great at talking. They're great at rah, rah, rah. They're great at taking and looking there through the woods and onto the plains and trying to rally the troops. But none are actually leading and taking the hill. We need the leaders. But we have to start on strategy. We have to start with what is most important. Where did our founders start? Well, I'm going to take you through some basic strategies, slide presentations, various forms of information, principles and methodologies, and I'm making them available on the website. But guess what? You're going to have to get a login to really get to these documents. Or you can, flounder and wander and go around. And this is a compilation in a microcosm of 40 years of political activity, grassroots activity, ground pounding activity as a precinct person, and what it takes to do the hard work and the leadership. We're going to have to talk about next week. What does it take to develop that leadership to be willing to lead from the front and take the hill? How are you going to build that? So the fact is that without awakening a nation spirit activated by the living Spirit of God, if that doesn't happen, you might as well look at it that it's the first pebbles, in the bushes at the bottom of the hill. We're going to come back into the next segment and we're going to talk about that. All the principles, all the methodologies, everything that I'm having there available for you are wonderful. They're necessary. But the point of all of this is that if you do not have the living Spirit of the Almighty in you and in those that you're working with, you're working in vain. We see that. The Republicans are always in turmoil because they have no true spirit in leadership. Come on back for the next segment. We'll see you in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns. This is Tom Navolis, your host, and what I am really interested in talking to you about now is the critical aspect of what does it mean to have the spirit of the living God in a manner that was there at the beginning of this nation. I talk about that quite often, and again, right now is that go to the references at samueladamsreturns.net for today's program, and actually it's even more than the references. I have it built into the body of the blog post, are two very critical podcast slash blog post that I think that will give you the greater foundation for what I'm talking about. They take and these posts actually point to the destructive nature more greater than the educational system. There's a movie out there that is talking about the enemy within the church. I think that what I'm presenting to you gets deeper in the weeds in relationship to the enemy within the church. I highly recommend these two posts in particular. Now, when we're looking at this strategy, and as I mentioned at the close of the last segment, if we don't have that spirit of the Almighty, we're not going to be able to make it over the first pebbles and bushes at the bottom of the hill. Taking the hill really begins where this country did begin in biblical Reformation living, not just in all of the little fancy dancy stuff that may happen in all of these liberal churches out there, feel good, touchy-feely stuff. It comes down to the real hard core aspects of who is the living God and how do we live in the context of that. So what I want to refer you to are these two posts. They're hard hitting, and if they don't kindle a fire in you to build that initial understanding and then strategy from all those other postings, documents, principles, methodologies aren't going to mean a thing. Well, don't mean a thing, but they're going to continue to give us the convoluted mess of no oneness, no common mind. I have a good friend. He's been on the program, and I'll mention his name because I think he's doing a fabulous job here in Ohio in trying to bring people together, and that's Tom Hack. He has these bubbles that he brings together and trying to describe conservatism versus liberals, and how do you come together from a mindset. I like what he does, but I have to always address, and he and I have talked about this, is that there has to be that core spiritual commonality even across godly, conservative, biblically reformed denominations. Without that oneness, that 1/3 that won the American Revolution can't even come together. So to help you dig into this, what I'd like you to go ahead, take a break if you want. Don't come back if you get totally ticked. I hope you do come back. But go watch the bottom of the empathy hole. That one to me is fabulous right now because I see in especially the young people, it's all about my feelings. It's all about feelings. It's all about, oh, don't hurt my feelings, these safety zones, all this other stuff. We're even seeing that, as part of the catalyst for the insanities that are going on, even with Israel, Hamas, and all of that. But more so, what we see it is in all of the LGBTQ, LMNOZ, wacko, sinful stuff, the trans stuff. Oh, it's about my feelings. Well, you don't even know who you are as a person, or that the fact and realities are that you're a created entity and you need to deal with that first. Well, this will really get under your skin. And if it does not, and this is even for people that are within the church, if this does not cause you to take a deeper look at truth, to fight a real battle instead of feelings sitting in a darkened church and all of the stuff that goes on. Sorry, I'm not trying to mock it. What I am trying to do is say, where is true worship? Where is the coming together as our founders did to build a common coalition led first by Almighty God? If you're not led there, then who is your leader? So anyway, the bottom of the empathy hole, there's the link there, as well as the link not just to the video, but also to a transcript where you can see it at the blog site. The next one that you should watch is called Thanksgiving Leftovers. I mean, I hope you enjoyed your Thanksgiving leftovers, but at the same time, it all ends up in the garbage. And I have to tell you is that when you're taking and you're considering these Thanksgiving leftovers, this one's going to hit you right between the eyes. Right between the eyes. And if it doesn't, then I don't know. You might as well just take and go to try and take the hill, go and try and build the coalitions, but I think you'll end up with the same thing that we end up with every other thing as it moves to November of next year. A lot of unraveling, a lot of activities that are going hither, thither, skither, and all over the place. This one, it'll give you a shocker. And I like this little quote here about the real action has to do with the psychological implications of this. You're going to have to go to the previous paragraph to look at what all the thinkeries are and that. But this particular is that it used to be a sociological prediction, but it has somehow become a widespread person by person expectation, and all the people are anxiously waiting their turn, and some are doing more than simply waiting. The troubles arise with the strivers and the climbers and the yearners, those who will do absolutely anything to get their 15 minutes on stage. And this is where Doug is approaching what is going on in social media. And we're using this. But what we need to do is understand what it means to be a real warrior. What is it going to take, and look at this this cry of the left that we are destroying democracy. Well, you've seen on a program, and I'm divesting from this article, but the fact of the matter is that the democracy that the left talks about, I want to destroy. Actually, I think that you really need to listen to this, and I'm going to talk about this part on democracy and believing in it. John Stott was a theologian, and Doug quotes this idea that fuzzy thinking was one of the characteristic sins of our age, is what John Stott said. So think about that, fuzzy thinking. We have a lot of fuzzy thinkers out there. So nowhere is the truth of this maxim more in evidence than when it comes a near universal faith in democracy. And then he goes on to talk about that, but instead of thinking of democracy as a reasonable mechanism for a large population to make decisions, here's the key. And this is the battle we're against in language with the enemy. It has morphed into an ideological faith in an ideal democracy, trusting that if the people just spoke, it would inevitably lead to good outcomes. But this is a blind faith in ideal democracy. It was child's play for the commies then to affirm the conquest and advance the idea that whatever leads to good outcomes therefore had to be democracy. And because they had, in the meantime, appointed themselves to be the editors-in-chiefs of our cultural dictionary, good outcomes were defined as such by them. And then you'll have to listen to the rest of what Doug has to say and read in relationship to that particular post. He also has another one that I didn't give a reference to, but if you go to the blog there, I'm sure that you will catch the last punch in the nose if you are really ready for, quote, this is what's there, it's called mud fence ugly. Mud fence ugly. You gotta, I'm sorry, I'm promoting these because he's one of the few that are speaking that punch in the nose truth to believers as much as to everybody else that's involved in the political process. If you don't like it, then continue down the path that you are in our political life and system, and that's where you'll be, is in a political life and system. But what I want you to understand is that there's other good, solid preachers out there, like my good friend Mike Spalding and numbers of the people that he's associated with. Get to know them. Get out there. Listen to preachers of truth. Listen to those that will take and understand the full context of living Christianity, extensible into every aspect of life, not just parking it in a pew or a chair on a Sunday, but what does it mean to fight in truth in your office, at your press, at your machine shop, at your car dealership, wherever you may be. I think it's critical that we really understand what these truths of warfare are, where the real strategies come from that meet the rubber, that actually get into the dirt, that are there on the plains or in the woods, that will give the leadership necessary to bring you to the leadership of God's Holy Spirit, so that there's continuity, no different than there was during the founding era. If you're going to really be one of the 1/3 that are fighting, then I highly recommend that you understand this truth and really saddle up, as they say, shake it, make sure your gear isn't making noise, and saddle up, because we're going to talk about strategy in the last segment. Come on back with Sam Adams as he returns. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams Returns. The Anti-Federalists, they had it correct because they understood the foundational truths of the time. We can go back to the last segment, second segment, but it's critical that you do, if you are in the market that missed the second segment, you need to go back and get to it, or at least go to samueladamsreturns.net and look at the blog post for today, because the links that I give on 2 videos and the blog post associated with those videos, go there now. I made that same plea at the first segment, but I'm going to tell you again, you need to go listen and watch and read what Doug put together in those posts. Doug Wilson, he put that together. And once again, as I finished the last segment, without understanding that hard-hitting information and doing a self-check in relationship to it, and understanding that there will be no political continuity until there is continuity within the church from a true biblical Reformation perspective, until that is there, and we see leadership that is willing, like I take you through the chaplains and clergy of the Revolution, you need to go there too. Go to that and listen, watch, or just read those pastors, preachers, teachers, theologians that went to the battlefield. And in some cases, like one of the former presidents of now, Princeton? He was a sniper on a hill as a clergyman fighting against our enemies to form this nation. Well, I think the likes of Mike Spalding, James White, Doug Wilson, and a number of others are those types of leaders. Might not be the snipers on the hill, unless it gets to that point, but they're snipers taking out the enemies in the church and trying to bring people to the realization of it requires the Spirit of God to form that unity to win in the battle. But based on your eschatology, if you want to go sit on the roof and wait for the SEALs, angels, I guess you can call them angel SEALs, angels, special forces. You want to wait for the trumpet sitting on your roof? Why don't you just go away now? Because if you want to know the strategies to put them into effect in any reasonable manner, you're going to have to take and have a login on the website. I'm sorry, I've given so much away over 40 years that I'm not finding people that are actually interested in reading, understanding, applying. So if you're really interested in reading, understanding, and applying, you're going to have a login to get this information. I don't know. Otherwise, guess what? Why don't you just take and go out there and start using DuckDuckGo or SmartLink or something like that to find the information yourself. Especially if you want to be a leader, this is important to have. But, with that, I I'm not asking you to pay anything to get the login membership or that. I always say if you do want to put a ducat in the bucket, that's always nice, but I just want to know you're serious. So this, which I'm going to discuss in these next 10 minutes, if you will, is a compilation of just a smidgen of the compilation of 40 years of being in this fight. And I'm at this point not willing just to give it away and it ends up in a trash bin or it ends up in a delete file or it ends up, somewhere that you're not going to implement it. To this point, I was on a call this week. Excellent, well done by Ohio fan Tom Hack, who I mentioned before, led it. Great information. There's an app out there. I will put a link to Ohio Fan if you're interested, that this app is a fabulous app for people coordinating, trying to come together, and a lot of information. Not only that, there was a gentleman that came on talking about the number one elected position that makes a difference in everything: precinct committee people. So let me start with that. I'm going to put up here for you the Colwitz Washington PCO manual. This PCO manual, I think, is very easy to use, very easy to understand. And in fact, what I'm going to put up for you as well, believe it or not, is something that I was able to dig into, to find, to almost, if you will, I'm not going to say, it was free out there on the internet. So it's the Democratic PCO training manual. The Democrats have trained PCOs for decades. And the Republicans, when I started being a precinct committee person, there was no training manual. No training manual in the state of Washington. Hardly anything in the state of Ohio. Hardly anything across the United States. There were a lot of good people putting these manuals together, but the Democrats have had them for 30 years. They train their PCOs to fight, and they even manipulate history to do so. So if nothing else is worth taking and logging in to get it, you want to get the Democrats precinct committee training. And what does that all mean? Also, what I have here for you is the Citizens Rulebook. The Citizens Rulebook is, I think, very important to take and have to be able to go through and get a interesting perspective on it was always a handout. I used to hand these out a lot, and they even have the jury handbook in there. What you write as jury duty, what does that mean? What are the laws? What are the jury rights? We're seeing all these things with the Trump trial. Half of them aren't even with the jury, and we know that the juries are fixed. So I think that it's important. Jury handbook is something that, you can buy them, I think, still, but you can also use this and hand them out. There's a interesting document here is on losing our sovereignty. Well, what's been going on with that? I think it's just a nice historical piece that was put together, and it gets to not my analogy of taking the hill, but establishing the beachhead. What do we have to do? What do we have to look at to establish the beachhead so that then we can go and take the hill? You got to get on the beach. And the majority of the people aren't even anywhere near the beach unless it's there to go have some margaritas, daiquiris, or some kind of libation or whatever. This one is John Becker put together as a central committee document. I think this is a good one to take and have. Here's another one that I think is well done. Oh, have you not gotten to the point yet on the precinct committee person and the importance of that? Well, here's one from the Republican Party of Kansas, and this was done in January 2009 and from Leavenworth County. I hope you're going to do something and learn something here. I think there's enough information out there for people on what it means to run for a central committee, whether it's Ohio or whether it's elsewhere. I also look at here going back to 2003 on the PCO training manual. This one was Washington State Republican Party finally put one together in 2003 after I fought to get it done. They didn't have it. Robert's Rules. You need to learn Robert's Rules. It's a must. Here's one from the Democrats that I think is interesting as well. Learn from the Democrats. Learn how your enemy wins. Learn how your enemy wins. There's a slide presentation here. You signed on to do what? And it goes through very interestingly what it is to be a PCO, definitions, objectives, actions, activities, responsibilities. You know, I see in my county, people will get elected as PCOs and they go to the meetings as necessary, or some of them don't even show up to the meetings. And they don't know Robert's Rules, and they don't do anything in their precinct. You're the first elected person there is in your community. You have a responsibility to represent those people in your precinct. You have authority to act within the scope of your position to disseminate truth to your neighbors. Do it. Participate. I mentioned a moment ago Robert's Rules. You need to learn Robert's Rules. One last one. John Adams' view on citizenship. And this is done by a Todd Wallingford for Hudson High School. And this is from Boston, Massachusetts area. And this is Lessons for a Contemporary America. Takes it from John Adams and what he had to say. Goes back to the Stamp Act, gives you a historical context. We do not understand our history as to why we need to fight. It's not just about all of the local issues, not just about all of these issues that are upon us right now. It is a requirement to understand, as I've talked in the past, and will continue to do so, is that we are experiencing everything from the Stamp Act on that our founders did in regards to the attacks on liberty. Bottom line. And even the attacks of the church were no different, because they were attacks on the moral fabric of what it means to have liberty. I'll just take this moment and say, go back. If you haven't already listened to those posts by Pastor Doug Wilson, I highly recommend that you do. And I thank you for hanging with me throughout this program. I really appreciate it. Come back when Sam Adams returns.